We're still missing some people, but a few did tell me that they will be late, and two said they would not be able to make it today. So shall we just get started?
Yeah, I think that's good. We can get started.
Okay,
and
yeah.
have the recording.
Yeah, let's do that. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is our third bi-weekly meeting. Glad you're all here. And today we have actually a short agenda, but lots of information. Just a few things we want to discuss today. One is that we receive emails from cohort members regarding the compensation. And then I just realized I went back to our slides and said, oh, actually, the last time we talked about that matter specifically was back in the info session. We didn't go back and talk about the details of how the payments work. So I wanted just to have just a few minutes to clarify that, just making sure everybody's on the same page. And then I know for Fresno State cohort members and also Sonoma State, we had our lab visits in the last week. I don't know if you were able to meet anybody in the past 3 days, because I know it was difficult to arrange a time among the cohort members.
Yeah, Amy was able to get in there and she can discuss that. But for Nilo and Azadeh, the timing didn't work because of a lack of access to the Clever Lab. But
Okay.
It will happen very soon.
Okay, so we're gonna have a discussion about the lab visits and also like assignment 2, because we realized, okay, not many people submitted assignment 2, so we probably have to extend that, considering so it's probably because many of them have not decided what they wanted to do yet. So we'll talk more about that today as well. And then last we have a special guest today, Fadi Castronovo. Fadi was a very good friend of our team, and personally, we both graduated from Penn State, and Fadi used to work, is also part of the CSU system until which year? 2020?
2020.
Yeah. Up to 2020, he was an assistant professor in CSU East Bay, and then he moved to, he left us, he moved to Europe, UK. He's now working at University of Brighton. So he is also, in case people don't know, he's also the external evaluator on this proposal. We're very lucky to have him. He's very experienced in assessments. That's why I want him to come over and to give a talk about educational assessment in VR applications. Later, in the semester, you'll see him again because he's gonna do the midterm evaluation for us. I think it was November 30th. We had that on.
So, yeah.
So he's gonna meet with the group, but not the project team during that meeting, and just to follow up with the cohort members and see how what needs to be improved, what went well so far in the project. So that's pretty much what we have on the agenda today. And so here's the first item. I'll have Wade talk about this.
Yep, thanks, Vivian. Well, like Vivian was saying there, we really need to get this sorted out because I think, it's fair for us to acknowledge the efforts to put in so far. And I'm in the process of actually sending out those paperwork needed to those faculty members. So just in a quick summary is each campus handle this process slightly different, but, mostly the same. You will be considered as additional employment, and you will be needed to fill out a few paperwork there. Two installments will be paid off to you through the semester, through the course of your participation in the cohort. Since you already successfully completed the first part, which is the symposium, so we will actually go ahead and just release those funds to you. I know it's not it's not even close to what you have already put into the the cohort experience so far. a lot of you have put really serious thoughts into how you can actually get something out and get going and actually make an impact on the student learning part. We greatly appreciate that. So Sonoma State and San Jose State, my understanding is both funds have been transferred and all the sub awards have been executed. So Sarah and Abe, if you could actually follow up with your admin, you should be able to access those information right away. My recommendation will be let's start the paperwork immediately, so that way faculty will receive their first payment of $1,000 immediately, and the remaining $2,000 will be available towards the end of your participation of the cohort when they actually produce the first deliverables report after your first tryout. And usually that will be in the spring semester, summer-ish, when we actually gonna meet again. Hopefully some of you can participate in the second symposium when we actually welcome in cohort 3, which is also we call cohort C. That will be, I think that we're gonna have that held in Sonoma, and Sarah is gonna hosting us at Sonoma State University. Like I said, I'll reach out, I'll get all the paperwork pre-filled out with the sum of information provided by me, and all you need to provide is some fundamental information about yourself. And this is going to be a flat rate fee, $1,000. And the turnaround time, so far as I know, in the foundation auxiliary service there, since I push Nathan quite a bit, so on our side, so he should be able to get your paperwork around in a couple weeks, so you'll receive your payments very soon. I think that's really it, unless there's any questions related to this.
Wait, Gerald is not here. I just have a question for him, like since he's not part of Fresno State,
Right.
and who will be?
I will be in charge of that as well. That Jared is scenario is a slightly different, but mostly he will be considered as an independent contract. So there's IC information packet will be fed out by him, and that'll be it.
Okay.
That's a fairly straightforward. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll reach out to on our campus. I'll reach out to Demo and Havanas as well as Anahet, and I have 3 forms and 1 link for you guys, but mostly very easy form to fill out. Okay, I already pre-filled a lot of information already, so you should have no concerns or anything. If you do, reach out to me, please.
Will do. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Wei.
Okay. Let's move on.
Okay, so we'd like to take a little bit of time to talk about your experience visiting the VR labs at the respective institutions. And 2 of the questions are that we're going to be asking you. One is, how do you feel about designing an XR learning experience for your course after this visit? So just for purposes of kind of just conserving time today, I've actually created this Jamboard for us to submit our answers in. So we can just stay within the room here and just click on this Jamboard and place your answers for the first question here. How do you feel about designing an XR learning experience for your course after visiting the lab visit for your institution? And I think some of you have not gone yet, or maybe is there someone here who has not been yet? Oh, I think everyone's been there so far. So just take a few minutes to jot down your thoughts.
Like at
Yes.
Sonoma State and Fresno State, we did a little differently. Well, initially I was hoping to get all the cohort members at Fresno State all together, so we'll meet in one room at the same time. But everybody was so busy, so it was very hard to find that time that we could all meet. And in the end, we had to schedule 3 separate lab visits for our cohort members at Fresno State. But turned out I actually really enjoyed that, like talking to individual faculty members, spent time understanding their needs. What I think at the beginning, there seemed to be a lot of confusion, what could be done, what's realistic. Some of our cohort members had bigger ambitions than what potentially they could do, like could achieve in this very short, like a 1-year period of time. So I think it's important that we discuss at the beginning, knowing that what's practical, what's not. So if you're thinking about changing a course completely, that would require committee approvals, or just adding a lab section, for example, that would not be practical, because just going through that approval process on campus to add another course, or like a course component, a lab component to a course, that takes a while. So we really hope that you can just stay in whatever you already have, the course that you are already teaching. If it's something readily available, you found some applications readily available, yes, of course, we recommend that you do this pilot testing this semester, you're already teaching it. But if it's something that needs customization and need a little more or development time, then it's more realistic you're looking at a course that you're teaching in spring instead of the fall. So I just wanted to put this out there.
And let me just make also a note, because I noticed that there's no comments on the Jamboard just yet. Just use the sticky note to make a comment. So at the left, if you open up this link, at the very left-hand side, there are some options, and the fourth one from the top is the sticky note. So just click on the sticky note and add your comment and put it somewhere on the board here. So I've added a sticky note there to start.
I'm not seeing any options. There's nothing on my left-hand side.
Okay.
Are you using Chrome?
I am. Let me just make sure this is, I think it's under edit. It might be under viewer. Okay. How about now? If you should be able to see it now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
I've got a bar.
I'll change the other settings there. Thank you for the comment there, Maddie.
Of course.
So how do you feel about designing an XR learning experience for your course after your visit to the respective lab on your campus? And if folks are more comfortable sharing out loud too, if you'd prefer that, you're welcome to unmute yourself and share your experience as well.
So myself, I visited our Fresno State lab, and Wei and Vivian were gracious enough to show me what great equipment we have. And so I was really excited, and also they let me borrow one of the tools. So I'm gonna try to experiment myself and then see how can I design. I'm thinking not of a lab, but of a course to introduce for electrical and computer engineering students in terms of circuits. So in that regard, I think I need to explore quite a bit because it's quite new to me, and myself, I haven't used VR before, so I'm still exploring.
Thank you, Havanas. Still exploring. That's great. It's still early. It's still okay. Great thought.
Havana, is that a course that you're teaching in both spring and fall and spring?
No, I'm teaching it right now. So I'm thinking even to introduce towards the end of the course because I will not be teaching it next spring, but I might teach it next fall. I'm not still sure. I might even go to sabbatical next fall. So. Oh,
okay. The reason I ask is that just in case you don't find anything that's suitable for the class you're teaching in the fall, like time-wise, it becomes unpractical, then maybe it's worthwhile to consider to look at the courses you will be teaching in spring and see if there's anything available for one of those courses.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to do that.
Okay, so I see some comments in the Jamboard there. So we have some mention here. It definitely seems feasible, not that it didn't before. The write-up instructions for the biology demo was useful to see. The level of detail was particularly useful. I have some better ideas, but they still need further development. Definitely works. We had a trial session with students. Some were more enthusiastic than others, some more experienced with VR. Great. Thank you for your comments there. Let us ask the second question. Here is the Jamboard for the second question. What support do you need to help with the XR implementation, to make it feasible, to make it work? What do you need from us to support you? Go ahead and click on that second question. You should be able to annotate this one now and let us know your thoughts. So use the sticky notes to place it in the Jamboard, or if you feel more comfortable to unmute yourself and share with us out loud, you are welcome to do that as well.
Just trying to maybe facilitate the conversation. You can even put something like, if you have this very near term, like immediate, easy to low hanging fruit type of implementation, what do you think you want? Or then you can be more ambitious, saying, this is my, longer term goal. I really want you to be able to do this. In order to do that, I will need those type of supports. I think as you are actually getting more familiar or actually get some experience using XR in your classroom, your perspectives may change. Then the levels of integration will also change as well. So it may actually be helpful for us to understand what we can do as a group to be able to plan for different types, different levels of implementation, and different instructors may need different types of support at different phases of the implementation. That would be very helpful as well.
Yeah, and also I'm just trying to think the various ways that we can facilitate. One is, of course, like some of you feel that you definitely wanted to create your own thing. You need some tech support on that, and we do have limited resources for that. But if that's absolutely what you want to do, please also leave that note there, because we need to plan ahead with the limited resources we have. And or you think, while you're teaching a large class, you would like to have a student assistant help you during the implementation. That's something else that you can put in there as well. And something else I could think of, like you feel like after the lab visit, you think you wanted to have more frequent visit, or if you did not check out a device and you wanted to be able to check a device and just bring it home, your experience on during your own time, you think that would be more helpful. Also let us know.
Yes, great comments there. Thank you, Vivian and Wei. And Abe also has a request, if everyone can put their names after their comments, please. That way we can follow up with you and make sure that we can support you in the best way we can. Okay, so a few of you commented here on the Jamboard. I need an opportunity to go through the process of creating a 360 video and see if it is reasonable for my students to do it within a course. That is great, Dermot. We could definitely help you with that. And I actually have another project that I'm working on where that's exactly what we're doing, is creating 360 videos. And it is totally feasible, but if you have specific questions, any of us can answer that, and I can talk with you more about that as well. Amy is saying, considering developing an app with John about air parcels so students can learn about the lapse rates. That is great, Amy. Thank you for that feedback. There's also a comment I made via Canvas to you about also possibly using 360 videos for just an idea. If you'd like to kind of talk more about that, that would be great. Maddie is saying help with app development. Sarah connected me with a student who will be helping with this. And no problem, Maddie. I'm hoping it could work out. That would be wonderful. Any other comments? Any other ways that we can support you? And if you're not sure, go ahead and write that too. Maybe you need some more time brainstorming. Maybe you need us to kind of work with you one-on-one. We can totally do that with you as well. That's what we're here for, is to support you to with whatever you need to get this going here for you. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Do we have like a document bank of like questions that people ask during their VR experience, like even though they wouldn't be applicable to my science or my topic, just seeing like what are all the questions that, you know, post VR experience questions that biology asked after doing that experience. I feel like that could be helpful in me brainstorming with my own assessments.
That's great. Are you, Maddie, are you talking about with our cohort members after this experience, or are you talking about the students who are using these in their classes?
I'm thinking about the cohorts, like stuff that was developed last year. Yeah.
That's a great question.
So just like a shared Google Drive that just had that if
We
people are willing to
actually-
share that stuff.
Yeah, I want to jump in, Sarah, since I have received quite a few report outs from David and Nihal, as well as William. We definitely have some sample questionnaires they use to gauge the students' interest and also do some sort of summative assessment on their experiences there. So we can definitely share those in the Google Drive or maybe in Canvas. And later on in the slides, I believe that Vivian's gonna show a few links that we have already put up in Canvas as well. Some of the instruments developed by research team ourselves. So for instance, so Sarah provided an attitudes test that she has used over the years to test, you know, how students actually responded to such experiences there. And Fadi is actually going to spend quite a bit of time in today's session to talk about, you know, how do we actually decide on what kind of assessment, and for different types of assessment, what are some of the possible strategies or, you know, instruments we can utilize. So yes, definitely we can provide some. At least we can provide some, you know, starting point you can think about. I understand that for each discipline, the type of assessment may be quite different, but I think the rule of thumb, like how you actually compare, look at measure success, that kind of thing, will be really similar. And also students experience-wise, their experience towards the technology could be also similar as well across different disciplines. So yes, we'll definitely be able to help on that.
Great, thank you.
That's a great question, Maddie. Any other questions? Vivian, maybe we can go to the next, not the next two slides, but maybe the one after that, if you don't mind. So homework number 2.
Oh.
So I just want to mention quickly, homework number 2 was something we requested to be completed for today. And we saw only a few people had submitted this. So we want to see if there were any questions before we moved on, since you have us all here. Were there any questions that you had for homework number 2? This is creating the active learning backward design planning. And I suspect that people are going to probably have some more ideas after Fadi's talk today. Elisa just didn't have the time to do it. No worries. Okay, so feel free to reach out if you do have questions about this. You can place it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself if you'd like. But maybe we can go to the next slide, Vivian. So here are some samples of assessments that we've made available to folks. These are on our Canvas page. At the very bottom of the Canvas page, there's a module that has all sorts of resources. Here are some sample pre and post surveys of an astronomy survey that I had used in conjunction with a collaborator from Sonoma State, as well as an attitudinal survey that was used also. So I've shared here these with you. There are also some guides at the bottom, some user and usability test questions, and some gaming experience questionnaire as well. So I don't see them on the modules on Canvas. Okay, we'll check.
Maybe
to
I'm
see
just
if they
looking
were-
in the wrong spot, but I have the page open right now, but maybe they're just somewhere else.
Let's just take a
Probably
quick
not
look.
just made public, not published yet. We can just publish that
Yes, it was
module,
not
yeah.
public. Here we go. I actually just unpublished it now. So just redo your screen. And you should be able to see them at the very bottom. Thank you for your comment, Lisa.
Yep, they're there. I see them now. Thank
Okay.
you. I'm just like, like all my annoying students, like you said you did it, but it's not here.
That's good. Yeah,
I didn't
and
do my homework.
also,
I didn't do my homework, and the stuff you said on Canvas isn't on Canvas. Like all of my students, I've turned into one of them. I'm so sorry.
oh, no
You
worries.
are all
This
good.
It's
is
good that
definitely
you
helps
caught that.
understand. Yeah.
And Fadi's slides I already posted on Canvas. I believe I published already. So if you want to just access it from there, and you can follow his talk in the next 30 minutes.
Yes, this is a perfect time actually to transition into Fadi's talk. And he will
Let's
talk
do
more
it.
about assessment. So you go
Hi,
ahead and
everybody.
take the stage, Fadi.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Vivian. Hi, everybody. I apologize if my voice is a little on the raw side. I just finished teaching for 4 hours, and I had 2 workshops before that. So it is 7:30 p.m. here in the UK, but that doesn't mean that I'm any less excited. Just my voice is a little raw. So as Vivian mentioned at the beginning, I am also the external evaluator here for the LSXR project. And so I wear multiple hats. And today I'm wearing a hat where I'll be talking about a little bit of my experiences in doing educational assessments with the use of virtual reality applications. So I'll be talking about 2 types of experiences, one being a quantitative and the other being qualitative assessment experiences. And I will try to go through all the presentation in half an hour. There are some things that I might not be able to get to cover, but just like we do with our students, there's some things that you can also go back and read on your own from the slides, and it should be fairly straightforward in terms of concepts. Did I not? Okay, just a fun fact. I was a faculty member as part of the CSU system up until 2 years ago. I was at California State University, East Bay. Vivian mentioned it before. I was in the engineering department, and in particular in the construction management department. I was there for about 5 years, and then an opportunity came up for me to go back or get closer to my original home country of Italy. And so I decided to take it and leave California in the middle of the pandemic and move here. But with that being said, as I mentioned, I wanted to mainly talk about 2 experiences, one being quantitative and one being qualitative, but as they align to a specific type of framework as it relates to game validation, and within game validation, simulation game validation. And the reason why I tend to quote this framework, which is a framework, I think, published in 2002 by Feinstein and Cannon, is because it provides a fairly good structured way in which educators or researchers should try to approach the evaluation process, especially as it relates to anything related to simulation. Now, simulation games is a fairly broad topic, broad term that you can specify whether it is computer-based simulation or even just analog type of simulation. So the researchers don't specify what type of simulation that they talk about, but I've been using it quite a lot in my research as it relates to educational gaming, educational simulation games, serious games. And so all of those are a little bit different from each other, but the approach that you can take with this framework it's fairly adaptable for each one of these cases or each type of simulation or simulation game or construct that you're working on. In particular, what I'm gonna be talking about, and I'm gonna try to annotate. I haven't used Zoom. They don't allow us to use Zoom here in the UK because it is it's a privacy concern. But we're going to look at, and hopefully it's circled and everybody can see it, but we're going to be looking especially at the validation from an educational perspective. Now, simulation games can be also validated from a representational validation perspective, and that's where they're to see whether the game's logic and structure from an internal perspective is correct, or if the phenomenon that you are modeling is correct. So that's more on the representation. I'm going to talk about the educational perspective, not to say that the two shouldn't go together, but I could be talking for hours about the whole validation process. And within validation from an educational perspective, we're going to talk about the internal validity of an activity or the external validity of an activity. Now, the internal validity, I will be explaining each one more specifically, but you can simplify it as understanding whether the learner or the student is engaging with the simulation with insight. I'll explain that a little bit more later, what that means. Meanwhile, the external validity is, can we measure the learning that the student has engaged in, and is it transferable outside of just the simulation game? So I'll get to explain both a little bit better. So starting with the first one, and now I don't know how to turn off the drawings. Mouse. Great. So the first experience that I'm going to talk about is a experience in the application of virtual reality game in order to improve architectural design reviews. So Vivian and Wei, you've seen this presentation many times. I think Sarah might have presented it to you before. It is an experience that I had back in California while I was at East Bay. And I wanted to show it to you because it talks to the external validity aspects of assessment and external validity aspects of validity. And external validity, as Feinstein and Cannon define it, is the process, and I gotta minimize this thing, asks whether the internal processes correspond to relevant phenomena outside of the simulation. You can simplify it or reinterpret it as, can we test the students if they met the learning objectives, and can we test them outside of the simulation, right? You can think of it as, did they go through an activity? Did they engage in the activity? Let's give them a post-test to see whether they learned something, right? So that's an oversimplification of what external validity is, but you can think of it again. Are these internal processes that are engaging the simulation relevant in phenomenon outside of the simulation as well? And so what I'm going to showcase to you is an external validity application or assessment process. And in particular, what I'm going to be talking about is how we measured the engagement of students in performing design reviews or architectural design reviews. Now, the design review process is fairly easy to grasp, and that is the process of analyzing whether a proposed design solution, architectural design solution, but you could also think of it outside of architecture, has met specific programmatic requirements, specification, user or owner requirements as well. And in our field of construction and architecture, we've been trying to not necessarily step away from 2D drawings, but we've been working very hard to supplement the typical 2D drawings with 3D visualization. And that's because a virtual representation, as Rice mentions here, is a powerful aid in enhancing the evaluation of a proposed design solution because it lowers the cognitive effort required to understand an architectural space. If you ever looked at 2D drawings or a floor plan of a house and you might not know where specific things are, or you need to translate in your mind from a 2D to a 3D environment, we tend to spend more time on the translation of that 2D to 3D instead of just spending time on the evaluation aspects. So we've been evolving the way in which we perform design reviews in the construction world by supplementing the 2D with the 3D. And one thing that I wanted to understand is how can we support our students in gaining these skills as well, not only gaining the skills of design reviews, but also gaining their skills in using 3D environments to perform these design reviews. So I wanted to I set up 4 specific research questions to kind of tackle this general question or this general desire to meet a goal of implementing virtual reality inside of the classroom, or in general visualization systems inside of the classroom. I wanted to understand whether a specific order of implementation of the activity, of the active learning activity that I'll talk to you in a second, would yield higher educational impacts on the students' ability to identify mistakes in an architectural environment, or does it help them gain specific knowledge in the process of performing design reviews, or does playing the game actually support the students in increasing those skill sets? So multiple research questions, and notice how I started off with the research questions before even necessarily jumping right into the virtual reality environment. And that is because if I have clear research questions, then I can clearly design and develop an activity that can help me answer these research questions, and can also design an assessment strategy that can help me answer these research questions. So I designed a game that gets the students to walk around the house. And this is a house that was in San Francisco. And this house model has lots of mistakes inside of it. And they need to identify different types of architectural mistakes inside of it. For example, the railing is not attaching itself to the ramp, or the floor is not well distributed, or the ground is getting on top of the ramp. So different types of mistakes, different types of architectural mistakes that we tend to have to evaluate and analyze. And so I designed a game that would engage the students in not only performing the design review, but also in learning the knowledge that they need to perform the design review, so they can learn the different types of mistakes, and also the reason why there are mistakes, right? And so I ran this inside of my classroom, and I set up also some learning objectives to drive the activity as well. And it was really important to identify these learning objectives also during the design of the game, because it would help me drive the design of the game, drive the design of the activity, so that I could directly meet those objectives and also measure these objectives. So as educators, we all know the Bloom taxonomy. Hopefully we all have seen Bloom taxonomy when you have to write the learning objectives for your syllabus. But so I created these learning objectives for the game, for the activity, so that I could make sure that we were gonna meet them, right? Or at least that I could measure and see whether we were gonna meet them. The learning environment that I picked was a classroom environment. And in specific, it's a classroom environment where I could have many different types or many headsets at once. I had about 10 headsets at the time. Now I have 20 here in the University of Brighton. And because there was a limited number of headsets and we had many students to participate in the activity, I actually designed the activity as well, so that as they're going through it, every 5 mistakes that they identified, the game would actually prompt them to switch player. So I think eventually it will pop up and then it will say, you found 5 mistakes, switch to another player. And so these students would switch the headset, and they would switch between a playing mode to a note-taking mode, right? And so one student would be kind of playing in the activity and walking, and the other student could be seeing what was happening on the desktop. And they could be also taking notes of the type of mistakes that they were identifying. So one was the driver, one was the note taker, and every 5 mistakes, they would flip it. And these are the type of mistakes that they could find. And I designed the activity to first, on day 1, they would do this with construction drawing. And day 2, they would do this with virtual reality activities, or sorry, virtual reality headsets. So I wanted to also see if that order of doing construction drawings first and then VR would have an impact. And then I did another group where I did virtual reality first and then drawing second. So this is what the activity looks like. So actually don't know whether I am sharing the audio, but that's okay. That's not really necessarily very important. But this is the example of the activity and teaching activity. So I introduce to the students the activity, tell them what they need to go through, what the handouts are related to. And then another really important thing as I go through it is that I do a little bit of role play with them. So I wear the headset, I go through the activity, I ask one of my students to also do it. So this was during the pilot stage study, and these are graduate students before I did it with the undergrad. So I'm wearing the headset, I'm going through the activity, I'm asking my note taker to take notes, but it was really important to do that role play. Otherwise, the students just start without really understanding what they need to do. So showcasing to them what needs to be done is really key in order for them to really understand what they need to go through. And then they go, they go through this activity, they do it themselves, there's a student play, they walk around, they identify the mistakes, they take notes, and so forth. And then there is a discussion phase with the entire class about what they learned. Sorry, everybody, I'm a little raw. So the experimental procedure that I went through, as I mentioned, I had two groups. One started with construction drawing. I did a post-test and then virtual reality and did another post-test. Meanwhile, another group did the virtual reality, post-test, then construction drawing, and then post-test as a second thing. And I captured two different types of quantitative data points. So this is the first experience being quantitative. The students had to find discrepancy in the building, so they had to identify a number of mistakes. So we were keeping track of the number that the students were identifying. They had to work in pairs to identify these issues. They had to identify whether it was a coordination issue, spatial issue, missing element, and so forth. And they were giving two papers or two handouts. The first one is where they actually had to write down the types of mistakes, and we would collect this data, and so we could quantify the number of mistakes. And then at the end, there was a test that was given to them, the post test, and there was a knowledge test that is aligned to the Bloom taxonomy objectives. And that would give me a total score, test score, that then I could use to compare whether they learned what we wanted them to learn and meet the objectives. Fairly simple test, true or false, multiple choice, and it was mainly geared to capture the lower order thinking skills that the students might be engaging in. So understanding and remembering the types of mistakes, or understanding the types of mistakes. And these are the results. So I'm gonna, I don't know what time is it? How much time? We have 15 minutes, so I'll try to go very, very fast. But based on this quantitative experience, we captured 110 students that did this VR activity. I did it, and also I was working together with a faculty member from Chico State, Patrick Brito. I don't know if you guys had the chance to meet him yet, but he also had some headsets, and we paired up together to collect data. We worked mainly with construction management students or construction engineering students. And as you can see here on the right-hand side, we have that the students that started off with VR were able to find a certain amount of mistakes, while when they went back to drawing, the number of mistakes that they identified was less than what they experienced or found in VR. And that's to be expected, because 2D drawing, you're cutting up or cutting away almost an entire dimension that they would capture if they were inside of the virtual reality space. The group that started with drawings obviously started with a lower number of mistakes identified, and then obviously got higher. When we tested the order, if there was any difference in terms of the total number of mistakes found, there was no significant difference between the groups that found mistakes in VR first, or the ones that found it second. So they found about statistically non-significant, the same amount of mistakes. But the interesting thing was the knowledge that we tested, and that was, we found that students that started in virtual reality, the knowledge that they gained was then transferable to the drawings. And so they retained that knowledge, they took that knowledge and then they retained it and transferred. While the students that started with drawing had a lower test score, but then went higher. So that was really interesting, and that kind of helped me understand what is the best or most optimal order that we could implement as educators. And it also, it was a quantitative way to kind of capture the impact that VR was having directly on the students. So really capturing that quantitative aspect is really key to validate the external aspect of the simulation. So going back to that external validity, we are noticing that the students can transfer the skills or knowledge that they're gaining in the activity directly onto a test that is not simulation based. I haven't been checking the, there is a question by Lisa. How come the VR knowledge assessment doesn't reach the same means in the right graph? What does that mean?
Sorry, I also didn't mean to interrupt your presentation. I wasn't sure how we were supposed to ask questions. I think it's so interesting what you just said, but then the group that started with the drawings, their knowledge assessment value for VR was lower than the ones who started. So is like that a function of how you did it as well, you think? Or
so we actually tested whether the group 2 and group 1 VR knowledge test was significantly different. It was not significantly different. So we did that test with an
answers my question, because it kind of looks like it could be, but the scale is small, so maybe it isn't.
It is a and it's not the scale is not out of 100, so it's kind of blown up. So it might seem that way, but it actually isn't. And the interesting thing is also that the drawings, obviously, for group 2 wasn't significantly different than the VR 1 in group 1. So yeah, absolutely. There's lots of interesting findings that we found. So I'm gonna speed through the next one. And so this was experience 1, and there's obviously scientific contribution, and there's lots of reflections and suggestions and lessons learned. I suggest that you go back in the presentation and you read the lessons learned. These are really good lessons learned that I suggest for anybody that is thinking about implementing virtual reality inside of the classroom, and also thinking about assessing as well the impact of the virtual reality activity inside of the classroom. So those are freebies that I throw at you after when you want to go back and read it. This one instead is a different type of experience. It's not virtual reality in terms of immersive virtual reality, but this is a simulation desktop game or a virtual reality desktop game. So you're not physically immersed inside of the space, but the students can actually play a desktop version of a game. And funny enough, this is part of my old dissertation back when I was a student, and Vivian was part of my external reviewing team. So she was part of my external, or I think it was, I forget what you were, but
advisory board.
You were part of my PhD advisory board. That's right. So this study, instead of looking at the external validity, so doing a post-test or testing whether the knowledge that the students have gained is transferable from the VR to a post-test, I wanted to instead look at the student insight aspect. So in the internal validity, as Feinstein and Cannon define it, is whether the students play the game with insight by making predictions and evaluating their choices. So it's kind of asking, what are they thinking while doing the virtual reality experience? It's separate than the external validity, which asks, can we measure it after the activity? So think about, again, external, outside of the game, internal validity during the game. And as they find student insight, I had to work a little bit more deeper in understanding what is or how can we define student insight. And in specific, it was related to projects related to construction scheduling, which are complex problems, or they're also known as ill-defined problems because they have multiple ways of performing a solution and they have multiple solutions. So there's a terminology called ill because it's both complex ways to find a solution and complex or multiple ways to have a solution as well, multiple right solutions as well. So to capture that insight, I'm going to skip a little bit. I'm just going to go here. To capture that insight, I had to draw or develop a cognition model, meaning I had to model what is it that the students are going to be engaging in, what are the students going to be thinking, and how do I want the students to think while playing the game? And is the model that I have created in the way that we want them to think actually happening inside of the game? So this is a qualitative methodology. We use a think aloud methodology. So as the students participated in the activity, they had to verbalize their thoughts. And we were looking, I say we, because in the end, it's always working together with other people. But being the lead, I was really interested in the cognitive thinking that the students were engaging in and the metacognitive regulative processes that they were engaging in as well. So cognition, you can think of performing an action or analyzing or identifying, while metacognitive is where they're thinking about their own thinking, where they're thinking or analyzing their own processes and their own thinking processes. Are they monitoring it? Are they evaluating it? And are they or are they setting goals for themselves? And then what I also did is that I made sure that for each of these cognitive processes, there was a visual representation associated to that. And by visual representation, I mean a part of the game that was going to engage them in that cognitive and metacognitive aspect. So this is the game. It was called the Virtual Construction Simulator 4. And it got the students to kind of create a schedule of construction for a wooden pavilion. Then we had also a concrete structure and a steel structure. But it was quite complex game because it required them to engage in multiple things like comparing and contrasting different construction methods, analyzing for the best type of sequence of construction and optimize it and review it, to then selecting the resources that were required, like how many construction workers or equipment. And then they have to actually play it out day by day. They have to hire workers and hire equipment. And then notice that productivity was impacted by the learning curve of the workers or their fatigue or the weather and so forth. So it was quite a complex simulation. Obviously, this is my PhD thesis, so it took 4 years to create the game and also analyze it. But what I did with the evaluation part was I wanted to answer 2 major research questions. Do the participants apply cognitive and metacognitive operations of the problem-solving model that we created while playing this game? And do they shift their metacognitive and cognitive operations across different types of materials that they're working with, making sure that they are playing the game with insight? So are they thinking about the different types of concrete or steel and methods that they need to go through in order to solve it? So I did a think aloud protocol. So it basically gets the students to think out loud. It's kind of like a user testing, but it's a little bit different than user testing because we're not asking them to think about how is the game working, but instead just thinking about solving the problem. So it's a bit different than user testing as a type of evaluation. And I captured methodology. I captured the students playing 3 different modules. We started all of them at a wood module. So they have to create a cabin or the shed that you saw before. And then we split the students in either working with concrete and then steel, or steel and then concrete, just to control for whether there is a learning aspect, or does the module or does material have an impact on the students. I also did the external validity for the study. And so I captured about 105 students in total for one class, 42 for another, and 45 for another. But for the Think Aloud, I actually did only 5 students. So I didn't have to do 150 recordings of the Think Alouds, but only 5 students. And that's because this type of qualitative analysis doesn't require you to go into and having a huge, large number of data sets, because the data that you collect is quite large in that single data point. I'm gonna go forward. So out of 5 students, I collected 1,500 minutes of recording. There was about almost 4,000 coded operations for wood, about 3,800 for concrete, and similar for steel. And they averaged about 7.7 cognitive or metacognitive operations per minute of play. And these are the type of examples of what does it mean in terms of thinking that we're looking for. So for example, there might be identifying factors that affect the current construction by saying the productivity was significantly affected by the weather, or then say evaluate the resources and they say, okay, we finished that. So 1 concrete pump, 1 gas engine vibrator, and blah, blah, blah. So we coded all this data, and it takes quite a long time. I'm not gonna lie, this type of assessment is quite complex, and it's actually it's kind of easy to collect, but then it takes a long time to evaluate and to analyze. Meanwhile, the quantitative external validity type of studies are kind of quick to evaluate, but they answer different types of questions. And you can see here that the students that engaged in the game, in blue is the wood pavilion, in orange is the concrete, and in steel is the, sorry, in green is the steel. And Vivian and Wei will notice right away that correctly as students should be engaging if they're working with steel. It takes a lot more time to sequence steel because there's a lot more steel members. There's steel, what is it called? Oh my God, now I'm really tired. Steel flooring with concrete pouring. Meanwhile, concrete is much easier to sequence, but what is more challenging is the fact that with concrete, you have to manage the resources much more deeply because you might have only 1 concrete pump on site or multiple concrete pumps that you need to deal with. Meanwhile, steel, you might have 1 crane that lifts steel at a time. So it does reflect the type of active or of thinking that we want the students to engage in. And it changes based on the type of material that they're working with and the type of simulation that they're working with. We also looked at the metacognitive aspects. And so we also noticed that from a metacognitive perspective, they might be thinking about the way that they're solving their problems differently based on the type of material that they're working with. So I'm gonna, I don't know how much time we have left. Oh, 8 p.m. So I'm gonna stop right there. There's much more to it, but it was basically to show you that there are 2 main ways that you can go about assessing your work. One being an external validity and the other one being internal, one through quantitative methods and one with qualitative methods. So I'll take any questions. I'm sorry, I kind of ran out of space time.
Thank you, Fadi. That was amazing.
Yeah.
That was a lot
Yeah.
of wonderful work there. Wow, really cool.
Yeah, I've been doing lots of work in VR and simulations, so it's been lots of fun.
That's great. Any questions for Fadi?
I know I threw a lot at everybody, so.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot, but I think it gives everybody a overview. Okay, this is what you can do. Like most of the time we will think about the pre and post test, but there's something you can do during that experience. Yeah, you can ask them, yeah, like not necessarily to the to the level that you're doing, but you could even just have someone like a facilitator on the side, just constantly ask them questions and making sure they're actually following whatever that you're designing, like that experience that you want them to be on that track. So that would be one way to assess.
One thing that we did with the simulation game of the construction sequencing, we actually designed a second version of the game that in the middle of the simulation, it stops the simulation and asks the students, write down why do you think your productivity is varying. And we saw that by adding that just 1 prompt, the post-test of the students increased versus the students without the prompt. So having that metacognitive prompt embedded in the game increased their test score. So
there's a question from Amy there.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question. So that came out of necessity more than initially this wanting to have a secondary role. And that is because I didn't have enough headsets in a class of 40. And so because I only had 10 headsets and I wanted everybody to have an experience with it, I split the activity into sessions, but that still was not enough because I had 20 students and 20 students. And so I said, okay, since the one that's wearing the headset can be immersed, meanwhile, the note taker could actually see the desktop of what's happening inside of the driver's seat. Why don't I do something so that they're busy while the driver is doing something? And that's why I thought of the note taker where, okay, so if the driver is going through it and identifying it, then let's try to get them to do something while the driver is driving. And so I thought the note taker could be one way. And, you know, you could embed in the game something that you say, oh, I don't know where your discipline is, but let's say you do biology and they're walking around and they need to identify different types of plants, and this shows how little I know of biology. But maybe the driver is the one that needs to identify, meanwhile the note taker needs to kind of write down what they're finding, and then they can switch. Or again, I don't know what
Right.
discipline
And
you're
I
in,
really
but
like to have that little facilitator role there, because as a faculty, like instructor, you can't be with every single student at the same time. So if
Yeah.
you have that little tutorial or something, like one student can
that as
help
well.
the other student, they just have them work in pair. And I think that will make it a lot more smooth.
Yeah.
Maddie.
Question from Maddie.
Fadi, this is not really a question, just more of a comment, but I really liked the idea of order mattering, because, you know, I'm in geology, and so we lecture for a while, and then we go on our field trip, and then we lecture more, and you know, where that field trip goes is always a question that you're kind of wondering. Is the more immersive experience better to do first, and then you explain everything afterwards, or do you explain a bunch of stuff and then have the immersive experience, maybe enhancing it? And that's always a question. Unfortunately, you know, usually it's logistics that went out that conversation.
Absolutely.
It's like, well, if it's raining, you know, we go next week.
Absolutely.
That really makes the decision making for us. But yeah, I've had this exact same thought process.
Yeah, and that also came out of the fact that our teaching industry, or industry, Vivian, in ways, is fairly rigid and traditional. And to say, oh, we're going to get rid of the 2D drawings, somebody's head is going to explode. So that's why I say, I'm not saying that we should get rid of 2D drawings, because it's still a very important skill to have. But how about you start with VR and then do the 2D drawing, because then the students could actually improve their knowledge through that. So yeah, no, absolutely. I'm not for just VR for the sake of VR. It could also be implement or a supplement, or how can you integrate the two together? So absolutely.
Right.
Thanks.
Okay.
Great question. Well, I
All
think
right.
we are
Yeah.
out of time there. So, but
Yep.
thank you so much, Fadi, for sharing your
I
time
know
today.
I could speak for hours, and when I was creating it, I had to cut so much material, and there's still a lot of material that I didn't go over. So I'm sorry if I had to go through a bit fast, but let me know if you have any questions. I'll be more than happy to answer.
Thank you so much. We
Okay.
really appreciate it. So thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here. Thank you, everybody,
thank
for
you.
joining us today. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Fadi, have a great evening for you.
I'll see you at the NSF meeting right now. So
Yes.
I'll see
Sounds
you in
good.
the other
All
meeting.
right.
All
Take
right.
care,
All right. Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.